Greetings, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I just wanted to touch base with a quick explainer video about your upcoming division speeches. So, in a nutshell, your first speech, the community assignment, is supposed to detail for an audience the nuts and bolts of the community. What really makes them a group of people who share a ton in common despite their individual dissimilarities. Why do they come together? What are their rituals? What are their traditions? What are their songs? What are their secret handshakes? What you name it. But then the second assignment takes that same community and says, okay, well, now we know what really unites the community. What is a single issue that really divides the community? So if the first speech is about the fusion of a group of people together into a coherent community, the second speech is really about the fracture of that same community. And what is essential to note here is that this is not two different groups of people, right? This is not Georgia fans versus Florida fans. This is not Republicans versus Democrats. This is a disagreement amongst Republicans. This is a disagreement amongst Democrats or amongst Episcopalians, amongst Christians, amongst Americans, amongst South Carolinians. You get the idea. One community arguing with itself about a central and divisive and controversial kind of an issue. Then your final assignment is really when you argue both sides of the case. Is really where you start to develop persuasive arguments for or against whatever that controversy is. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But for right now, let's talk about your division assignment and making sure that you produce a neutral, objective, informative point of view on both sides' take within a single community about a central controversy that divides them. Let me talk for a moment as well about grading criteria. So for the first speech, what I was interested in looking at was what we had covered, which was organization. Do you have a clearly structured introduction with an attention getter, a predisposal section, a thesis, and a preview? Do you have clearly identifiable main points that are balanced in their development, that are easy to follow and flow nicely? Does it conclude with, obviously, a conclusion that has a memorable sum-up statement as well as some projection of the topic and the topic's importance into the future in a way that reaches the audience? What we're also interested in there, besides organization, is delivery. So we cover different facets of both verbal and nonverbal delivery. And we're also interested in the way in which you present the material extemporaneously, right? We're not interested in manuscript delivery. We're not interested in people just winging it. We're interested in that kind of Goldilocks point of view where you're able to fully write out a speech and then deliver it from memory or a set of bullet points, or you're able to write out bullet points and then deliver it with human-to-human, person-to-camera, or person-to-person connection without being overly reliant on your notes. What that means is really we're averse to reading. We're interested in extemporaneous speech because we're interested in audience-to-audience connections, speaker-to-audience connections, because otherwise, if you were just going to read the speech to an audience, you might as well just write the speech and publish it online or hand it out to the crowd. It takes out the embodied aspect of it, the performative aspect of it, the human aspect of it, to just stand up and read a speech. It also makes it more awkward for the audience. All of us have been in a situation where we accidentally answer a call from a telemarketer or some such, and you can tell when somebody is reading, right? Even if you can't see them reading, you can tell because it changes the voice. Sometimes people speak through natural pauses. Sometimes they sound disinterested. Sometimes they have a cadence, a flow of speaking that's too fast or too slow for the situation. There is a vocal inauthenticity that comes across loud and clear when an audience understands that a speaker is reading to them. And it begs the question of why there's even the human performance in the first place, right? So the first set of grading criteria that we covered last time was performing extemporaneously, performing in a fluid, sequential manner, and then making sure the speech is organized. We're going to carry all of those grading criteria, those three grading criteria, into this division speech, but we're going to add one more, and we're going to add use of evidence. So this week's lectures are all about citations and all about varieties of evidence and tests of evidence. Then over the next subsequent few lectures, we'll cover intrinsic appeals, what Aristotle called intrinsic proofs, ethos appeals to credibility, pathos appeals to the audience's empathy and emotions, and then finally logos appeals, or appeals to logic. And then the final set of grading criteria for the action assignment will cover the use of vivid and metaphoric, poetic kinds of language. So that's the grading criteria for this division assignment. We're just adding your evidentiary component in the oral citations. And the final thing to think about as you're preparing this division assignment is to think about structuring this division assignment. So the division assignment is purely informative. It is purely neutral. On the action assignment, you will have ample opportunity to take sides, to make persuasive arguments, to word things in a way that is most powerful for the audience and take the side of real advocates. In this assignment, you're taking the point of view of somebody who is simply trying to inform the audience. So what you do is begin with an introduction in which you set the scene. This is a community that has tons in common. They really rally around common causes in such and such a ways. However, they're really divided by this one central issue. Explain what that issue is. Offer a thesis about that issue, which is really where you get to the crux of the matter and tell the audience exactly what you think is really driving the issue. Why has this been such a heated, long-term, vociferous, animated debate? Right? What is really motivating both sides to fight, consistently fight and debate over this issue, and then include a preview. And then I think that the best way to organize this speech is really with two main points, a pro side and a con side. The pro side, obviously, you detail why people are in favor of it, of this particular issue. And so you really have maybe 2, 3, 4 arguments that the pro side makes in support of their point of view, paying particular attention to the kinds of evidence that they use. Do they rely on statistical evidence? Do they rely on anecdotal evidence? Do they tell stories to one another to satisfy the burdens of this point of view? What kinds of ethos, pathos, and logos appeals do they use? Then big transition, and then the con side, where you detail the opponent's arguments against a particular issue, paying specific attention to the variety of arguments they make. Do they make 2, 3, 4? Do they use statistical appeals, anecdotal appeals? And what are their ethos, pathos, and logos-based arguments? What's essential to note here is that I'm asking that you have 4 oral citations of experts. And what that essentially means is that you introduce somebody who says, Jane Smith, who is a professor of anthropology at Florida Atlantic University, said in 2018 that whatever she said. That's sort of the format of the oral citation. I've asked that you do that 4 times in the course of this speech. And really what's important there is giving a person's qualifications, which is really just answering the audience's question, why should I care about this person, what this person has to say? So giving their qualifications tells the audience that this is an expert in this field and you should consider their point of view as a result. And then satisfy some standard of recency by saying it was published in 2018 or 19 or 2015. You get the picture. But what happens then is that one of the requirements of effective main points is that they are balanced. And so if you're giving an informative speech, and this informative speech is 5 to 7 minutes, and you have, let's say, a minute for the introduction and a minute for the conclusion, and then you have 2 main points, right? So you're talking about a 6-minute speech, give or take. Then we're talking about there 2 minutes per main point. Well, what would happen if you cited all 4 experts for the pro side but not the con side? It would give the audience the suggestion that most experts align on the pro side and not the con side. It would give a perception of bias or imbalance. So we want to avoid that. What would also happen if you had 3 minutes and 15 seconds on one main point and 45 seconds or 1:15 on another main point? It would also suggest a kind of bias or imbalance. So think creatively about developing your main points in a way that is neutral, that presents both sides' best foot forward. What are the arguments they make and why do they passionately believe those arguments? And then keep in mind here that as we're moving away from your community details and into the specifics of this controversy, what's happening is that there's a risk of moving into the weeds, right? You're becoming more of an expert on this topic, far more so perhaps than your audience is, and your audience might be completely uninitiated. So the opportunities for hand-holding are legion, especially in the body of the speech. So think creatively about how to hold the audience's hand, to move them from sub-point to sub-point, to keep them interested, to make sure that they understand that this could be an important or interesting issue in their own lives, even if they're unfamiliar with this community or the particular controversy, and try to use language in a way that keeps their attention and holds their hand through these complicated points. Not just through the big transition from the pro side to the con side, but within the main point. Put yourself in the position of the audience and ask, if I was hearing this 2.5-minute main point about all these sub-arguments that the pro side is making on a controversy they're unfamiliar with, what would I need? Would I need an internal preview? Would an internal review of a sum up of their arguments make sense? Do I need linking language, next, moving on, language like that? Or signposting language? They make 3 arguments. Those are first, second, and third. So think creatively about holding the audience's hand and keeping their attention, making sure not to lose them in these big, complicated main points that we're developing. So to sum up, this is an informative, neutral assignment where you're taking on one community and showing how one side says X, one side says Y, making sure to keep the audience's attention entirely through the use of linking and signposting language, internal previews and internal reviews, and a balanced argument development for both main points. Feel free to reach out with me the questions, and I look forward to watching everybody's division speeches.